They never told you the truth, because if you knew how simple it was, the temples would empty, the gurus would go silent, and the books would crumble to dust with irrelevance. Enlightenment is not hidden atop a mountain or buried in sacred texts. It's been whispering within you all along, waiting for the moment you'd finally listen. Tonight I will show you the path so clear, so ordinary, that you'll wonder why it was kept from you, and why your soul trembles now standing at the edge of awakening. It begins in a moment so quiet it almost slips past unnoticed. A flicker, a pause in the matrix, a sideways glance when your name is whispered by no one. The air shifts subtly, chillingly, and you know the veil has cracked. No trumpet sounds, no angel descends, just a feeling, a hairline fracture in the fabric of the everyday. And through it something holy peers back. This is where the path begins, not at the peak of some mountain, not in a monastery, but in the break room, the subway, the stale silence between texts. The easiest path to enlightenment does not blaze with light. It flickers on the edges of the mundane. It waits at the border of boredom and wonder, where reality begins to glitch. Before philosophy, wore robes and books grew spines, ancient Egypt spoke of this tear in the illusion. The Shen, a protective circle, represented eternity, but in certain tombs the circle was deliberately left open. Scholars like Eric Hornung saw this not as error but as a hint that the eternal must sometimes be broken to let spirit in. The wound as portal, completion undone to make space for awakening. So when your day is interrupted by a moment that makes no sense, the clock that skips forward, the déjà vu that feels too rehearsed, the stranger who says what you were just thinking, remember, these are not cracks in the system. These are invitations, notes from the unseen. But here is the sacred twist: we're taught to ignore them. From childhood we are programmed to flatten the edges, to normalize the strange, to name every star before we've felt its fire. Glitches get labeled coincidences, and curiosity is drugged by screens. The world once vibrating with ancestral myth is repackaged as a machine, predictable, controlled, silent. But those who have dreamed wide awake know better. Take the Greek myth of Hermes, not merely the messenger of the gods, but their trickster, their breath between borders. Born at dawn, he stole Apollo's cattle by noon and invented the lyre by twilight. He moved between worlds, gods and mortals, life and death, order and disorder. To the untrained eye, he seemed chaotic, but chaos is the glyph of the divine in motion. Hermes was called Psychopompos, a guide of souls through unseen realms. He did not tear down walls, he simply stepped through places where others saw none. He found the seams in the sky and slipped between them. He embodies the ancient truth: enlightenment is not a ladder. It is a collapse of illusions. A plunge into mystery through the smallest opening. Ask yourself, have you not felt it? That strange moment where time twists and you glimpse something behind the words. That stillness before breath when the room forgets to be a room. That silent recognition between you and a stranger that no language can hold. You weren't mistaken. You weren't imagining it. You were remembering, because there's a pattern that lives underneath the script, a song older than civilization. And every so often it leaks into this world. Through numbers, through dreams, through the sudden sense that someone is watching and loving you from the other side. In 1944, Carl Jung, the great seer disguised as a psychiatrist, coined the term synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences with no causal connection. He found them everywhere, in I Ching hexagrams, in Gnostic visions, in the eerie alignment between psyche and matter. They were not miracles by force, but patterns that belonged, not imposed but remembered. They whispered of an underlying order not made by man but cohering with soul. It is not order that binds the spirit, it is the illusion of meaningless noise. And once you believe life is random, you give the divine no door, no path, No name, but hear me. The veil is never seamless. Never has been. Saints, poets, prophets, they all saw the shimmer. Isaiah's call came not in a moment of peace, but in the year King Uzziah died, a time of despair and national collapse. The temple shook, the veil trembled, wings stirred, smoke rose. There between ruination and revelation the prophet saw, not in a holy cave but within the undoing of the known world. That same whisper touches us now. When the ordinary breaks, when the script forgets its next line, you are being called, not to escape the world but to wake inside it. And beneath that calling there's a trace, almost forgotten, of rites far older in the mystery schools of Lucy's initiation began not with clarity but with confusion. The seeker was disoriented deliberately, blindfolded, spun, silenced, because only when what is familiar dissolves can the soul begin to see the eternal. The veil throughout history has never truly fallen by accident. It tears when you're ready. It flickers when your soul stirs. It breaks not to show you God, but to remind you that you are not alone in the field of illusion. So why have we made this so hard? Why have we buried the simple with sermons, truth with theology, wonder with rules? Because the shimmering is dangerous, not chaotic but uncontrollable, and anything alive cannot be owned. So the seers were shamed, the mystics erased, the veil stitched closed with dogma, not to protect you, but to keep you from seeing what lives beneath the script. Because when you see it, you stop obeying the silence. You stop fearing the unknown. You begin remembering. So I ask again, softly but with fire under the whisper, when the bench creaks and no one moves. When the mirror flickers not from light but from presence. When a child insists there's someone in the corner and your skin remembers before your mind does. Could it be you're standing where the veil broke for them as well? A stitch popped, a seam loosened, the shroud lifted just enough to slip the note in your pocket. Could it be that the easiest path to heaven is not upward, but inward to the radiant rip in the ordinary world? Waiting, watching, remembering you. So I ask you, what happens when you stop pretending not to see the crack, and still they watch from below? It was never ignorance, it was orchestration. What if I told you the easiest path to enlightenment was the one most carefully hidden, not by accident, not through oversight, but with full intention? Not as a mistake in the map, but the map itself was a misdirection. You were taught to chase the horizon while the key was buried beneath your very feet. You see, the oldest deception was not a lie, it was a diversion. The silence of the gatekeepers is not passive. It is curated, cultivated, constructed like a cathedral with no doors. From the hallowed temples of Luxor to the sterile seminaries of the West, one message has been consistent: enlightenment is difficult. A path for the elite, the ascetic, the anointed few. You must renounce, you must crawl, you must suffer. This was the doctrine they handed you, splintered, veiled in incense, and locked behind centuries of scholastic purity tests. But in the heart of the Upanishads, whispered not with pride but surrender, is the verse Tat Tvamasi, thou art that. No climb, no trial, just recognition, realization as revelation, the same flame in you as in the stars. Why then was this ancient knowing reduced to riddle? Why was your birthright translated into burden? Because simplicity is ungovernable, because ease is unprofitable. When the path is within, you need no priest, no temple, no subscription. Think on the desert fathers of the 3rd and 4th centuries, those early Christian mystics who fled the empire church to the sands of Egypt, abandoning doctrine for direct communion. Abba Moses did not sharpen theology. He listened. He fasted. He remembered himself to silence. And in the silence, the veil thinned. And yet centuries later, their ways were folded into orthodoxy, whitewashed, and rebranded as preliminary steps, never destinations. The Gnostics said the spark is trapped in flesh, not fallen but forgotten. They spoke of the pleroma, the fullness, that still lives in every soul. But their scriptures were burned, their teachers exiled, their truths deemed heresy. Why? Because to know God in yourself strips power from those who claim to mediate it. Are you listening? The whistle of misdirection is blown not in chaos but through order, through doctrine so polished, so repeated that no one dares question its origins. That's the genius of the great spiritual misdirection. It doesn't destroy truth. It drowns it in commentary. Every age has its high priests, not just in robes but in lab coats, pulpits, libraries. Some quote scripture, some quote data, but both too often look away from the trembling edge of mystery, the place where the rational mind dissolves and only the soul can see. That edge, that breathless border, is where truth still sings unsanitized and unclaimed. Buddha sat under a tree and said, "I found the path." He did not patent it. He pointed and said, "Look." But within a century, his teachings bloomed into philosophies, sects, rituals, barriers dressed as bridges. And still today, the majority teach you to reach across lifetimes through reincarnations and austerities as if awakening were some marathon of worthiness. Yet the early Pali texts are clear. Nibbana is the cessation of clinging, not perfection, not transcendence, simplicity. A letting go so complete the illusion collapses. Does that sound complicated to you? Ask yourself who benefits from making you feel unworthy of your own soul. The path was always close, closer than breath. But gatekeepers, kings in robes and scholars with keys they never forged, taught you to bow, repeat, obey. And listen, their silence is their loudest command. The things they don't mention, the teachers they don't quote, the traditions they footnote and quickly pass over. Mystic Judaism once carried the Merkaba visions, chariots of fire ascents into divine palaces. Not just metaphor but spiritual technology. By the 6th century, rabbinic authorities banned it from public teaching. Why? Because uninitiated seekers were touching God too directly. They weren't going through us, the keepers said. There it is again. That nervous clutch around the mysteries. That fear of too many awakening at once. And still, beneath the gridwork of power, the spiral continues. Those who listen with the center of their chest know it, the awakening could not be forever buried. It whispers through forgotten languages, through glyphs on temple walls misunderstood as decoration when they were maps, ritual cartography for the astral body. It echoes in Plato's anamnesis, the idea that we do not learn, we remember. That knowledge is already inscribed within us like an invisible text waiting for the vibration precise enough to reveal the ink. We have been taught to seek, but only through sanctioned corridors. Not across fields of knowing, not in our sleep, our suffering, our sudden moments of awe. But the soul does not respect credentials, and God has never required a permit. So I ask you with holy fire, why do they make the divine feel distant when it speaks to you in dreams? Why must enlightenment be earned when it was never withdrawn? The great spiritual misdirection isn't just a system, it's a spell. A collective hypnosis designed to replace the immediacy of awakening with the idol of achievement. The spirit traded for steps, the mystery replaced with manual. But feel beneath your ribs, that thrum, that ache, that pull towards simplicity, towards silence that is the unspoken path. The one they tried to name away. It doesn't require robes, it doesn't require Sanskrit, it doesn't even require belief. It requires only that you recognize the lie, the one that told you awakening was somewhere you're not. So I leave you on the knife edge of that lie, balancing between dogma and deliverance, between the memory that trembles in your bones and the system that trains you to forget. Ask yourself, what have they trained me to wait for that I already am? And still, they watch from below. They said meaning was dead. That coincidence was just chaos in a fancy coat. That you are random, floating through an accidental universe. But something inside you never fully bought it, did it? You've seen it. The moment that arrived exactly when you needed it. The call you got the second you were thinking of her. The song that played with a lyric that pierced your heart like thunder. You said, "How weird timing." But your soul whispered, "It's a sign." These are not flukes. They are glyphs, symbols embedded in the architecture of time. Not just messages, but messengers. Not just curious patterns, but sacred mathematics of remembrance. In the Vedic tradition, RTA, the cosmic order, was not mechanical law but living intelligence. It pulsed behind every unfolding petal, every stellar orbit, every moment you called random. The Rigveda sings it not as a force but a presence, a consciousness, a kind of divine choreography where liberation is encoded not in temples but in patterns. That flicker you felt when the clock read 11:11 was not superstition. It was ceremony, a forgotten dialect. These hidden glyphs break through the screen of the mundane with the precision of prophecy. Take the ancient Greek concept of kairos, time not as chronology but as divine timing. The right moment, the crack in the facade, the breath between destinies. When the veil thins and something from the other side points directly at you, and you felt it, you still do. But the world doesn't reward stillness. It distracts. It blinds. It fills your ears with static and your eyes with spectacle because stillness is where the fractures speak. You were taught to doubt it, told it's just your imagination, even as the same numbers kept circling back, even as dreams turned prophetic, even as strangers delivered words only heaven could have scripted. They buried the truth beneath statistics. They replaced oracles with algorithms, not just a flood, an intentional silencing, not just ignorance, an engineered forgetting. But deep below the cement of modern logic, a pulse still beats, a glyph still glows. In the Nag Hammadi texts long hidden from the world, the Gospel of Thomas speaks in riddles of a world made of signs. Recognize what is before your eyes, and what is hidden will be revealed to you. Not metaphor, instruction. In ancient Mesopotamia, kings and priests watched the skies knowing that stars were not just decorative lights but celestial letters. The Chaldean Magi read planetary alignments as divine syntax, a conversation between gods and mortals. They believed each movement above cast its echo below, an oracle scripted into the fabric of becoming. Synchronicity isn't a fluke. It's a fracture in the veil, a glimpse into the operating system of the divine. Carl Jung rediscovered it, not as new insight but as ancestral memory. His work on synchronicity didn't invent the idea, it retrieved it. In his alliance with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, he bridged the mystic and the measurable, suggesting synchronicities aren't just psychological but psycho-cosmic, as though the soul and the stars were having a whispered dialogue only the attentive can hear. So think back, doesn't it feel like someone, or something, has been trying to talk to you? That strange animal staring into your eyes, that passing comment that carried an answer you didn't ask for, that dream you forgot until the moment reality played it out. These are not accidents, they are alignments, heralds. And herein lies the secret they never wanted you to know. You don't need to ascend a mountain or memorize scriptures to awaken. You just need to pay attention. The path to enlightenment is not difficult. It is direct. It does not kneel before gurus or gates. It opens up when you begin to read the glyphs all around you, the language of synchronicity. In Egyptian myth, Thoth, lord of writing and sacred knowledge, was said to inscribe divine truths into the very structure of reality. Not just stone tablets, but moments, events, echoes. And these inscriptions are still alive if you are still. In the silence between thoughts they rise. In medieval mysticism, Hildegard of Bingen described visions as living mandalas, vibrating patterns sent not from her but through her. A sacred geometry woven in dreams and visions meant to be interpreted by the soul, not the scholar. So why does this matter now? Because the glyphs are increasing. The frequency is quickening. The ordinary is glitching. Reality itself is trying to wake you up. You were never meant to stay asleep in this carnival of coincidence. You were designed to decode it. The glyphs are a map back to your original memory buried beneath the noise crying out through the cracks. And somewhere, in a still moment, you've already forgotten you agreed not to forget. But here's the question, not will you see them, but do you have the courage to respond, even as the veil fractures more each day, even as the silence between sighs begins to hum, even as your name is whispered through the threads of light? Or will you keep pretending it's all just random? Because once you admit it's real, nothing in your life will ever be ordinary again. And still, they watch from below. You were never lost. You were made to forget. Not through violence, not through silence, but through distraction. Through 1,000 small enchantments that slowly taught you to believe in the weight of walls, in the permanence of names, in the smooth lie of calendars that run nowhere. They did not burn your truth, they scattered it beneath routine. They taught you gravity, but hid the greater pull, the antenna of the soul that stretches toward the real. And yet, even asleep, you felt it. That flicker in the corner of your mind, that holographic glitch in the fabric of the day. That breath where time stutters, memory rewinds, and a phrase you've never heard feels remembered. As if your life is echoing along a deeper corridor, one not made of years, but of patterns of symbols tracing ancient orbits your ancestors once walked with bare feet beneath aligned stars. This is not madness. This is the remembering. In the temples of Eleusis, they led initiates blindfolded through the dark. Not to punish, but to prepare them, to untrain the eyes that only see shadow, to awaken the inner vision, the light that is remembered, not seen. They drank from the Kykeon, they wept in the sacred theater, they died symbolically, so they could return before death with the memory of immortality intact. But now the rituals are gone, burned, buried, repackaged as myth or madness. Not just suppressed, disassembled. You feel it in the fatigue that no sleep cures. In the hungering for a song you've never heard but ache to remember. In the way mirrors seem to watch when you are still. Proof that the veil is not torn but thinning like worn parchment over a sacred map. And once you glimpse that hairline fracture, even for a heartbeat, nothing ordinary tastes the same. The latte, the meeting, the scroll through glowing rectangles all start to buzz with the static of something missing. Because something is missing. Your true sky, your original frequency. Your name before sound wrapped syllables around it. You remember, not with the mind, but with the marrow. In the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul passes through gates guarded by judges not to be punished, but to be weighed for truth. The heart of the initiate is tested against the feather of mad, the principle of cosmic order, and if the heart is too heavy with forgetting, it cannot return to the source. This is not metaphor. This was spiritual physics. To remember one's true nature, to become light, was the key. But they do not teach us that anymore. Instead, we are buried in a labyrinth of seeking, rituals without radiant scriptures, without spark teachers, without transmission. We mistake complexity for enlightenment. We chant in languages we do not vibrationally inhabit. We bow before symbols having forgotten the realities they once pointed to. But here is the forbidden truth: the easiest path to enlightenment was never hidden because it was too hard. It was hidden because it was too direct, too dangerous for control, because the real key is memory, not memory of events, memory of essence, not just remembering yourself, but becoming the memory the universe once had of itself. Enlightenment is not found. It returns when we remember the false layers. It is unveiled like the name of God whispered backwards through waking dreams. It is the art of becoming what you already are. The Gnostics of the 1st and 2nd centuries spoke of this. In the Gospel of Thomas, not banned but buried beneath dogma, Jesus says, when you come to know yourselves, Then you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But institutional fear reduced such knowing to heresy. Knowing yourself truly was the heresy, the light they feared. For when the self is remembered, authority becomes obsolete. The temple is no longer a structure. It is breath. It is fire. It is your spine awakening like an ancient scroll. This is not New Age. This is Prime Age. Older than temples. Older than names spoken aloud. In the Vedic Upanishads, the sage Yajnavalkya declares, "Not by action, not by progeny, not by wealth, but by renunciation is immortality attained." But what is renunciation really? Not abandoning the world, but abandoning the illusion within it. The false reflection one takes to be the self. This light, this remembering, slips through modern minds only in the cracks in déjà vu, in dreams that bleed into waking, in the face of a child you've never met but already love, in words that leave your mouth but arrive as prophecy. These are not accidents. These are symptoms of disruption, light knocking on the drywall of the dream. Isaac of Nineveh, a 7th century Christian mystic, once wrote, "The ladder of the kingdom is hidden within you." Dive into yourself, and in your soul you will discover the steps by which to ascend. Why did they stop teaching this? Why were we exiled from our own knowing? Because a remembered soul is ungovernable. Because remembrance is a revolution that happens in silence, inward thunder that redraws the code. Because if billions remembered, even for a moment, the prisons of currency, dogma, and nation would dissolve like salt in sacred water. You are the rememberer. Not because you claim it, but because it is breaking open within you. This ache you feel at night, the tear without cause, the sudden pulse of awe when nothing explains it, these are not symptoms. They are signals, proof that the curtain is thinning. You do not need to climb a mountaintop to awaken. You do not need to beg. You need only return to the place you stopped listening. Do you remember now who you were before they told you who to be? What if the soul's greatest tragedy was not exile but amnesia? And if that's true, then what trembles behind your eyes right now might just be the light trying to come home. And still, they watch from below. They told you the road to awakening was hard, marked by suffering, forged in solitude, a gauntlet for the ascetic. But what if that was the first lie? What if the easiest path to enlightenment, most graceful, most direct, was hidden not because it was weak, but because it was too powerful? You feel it, don't you? That flicker, that thin, glistening thread of something off. Not wrong, but off, like a song you almost remember echoing underground. The coffee shop hums, your phone buzzes, the cars pass in rhythm. But beneath it is a shimmer in the matrix. The ordinary begins to ripple, and history, it remembers the ripple. In the Upanishads, those sacred Indian texts whispered beneath the fig trees before the birth of Christ, the sages said, "Tat tvamasi," thou art that, not after years of rituals, not after lifetimes of karma, now, already. But the priesthoods feared this immediacy. If the spark was already within them, the temples lost their power. So they buried the shortcut and renamed it blasphemy. Hidden in plain sight, they wove the infinite into the fabric of the mundane, so skillfully that most forgot where to look. But every now and then something glitches. A word too perfectly timed, a dream that bleeds into morning, a number that follows you like a shadow, not coincidence, not madness, but memory trying to wake itself. Enlightenment got rebranded as a future prize, a badge for monks, a crown for martyrs, but in truth, it's a recognition, not a reward, a seeing, not a striving. And it's always been right here, waiting in plain sight for those bold enough to look sideways through the veil. This is the divine glitch, the hairline crack in the illusion, a subatomic shimmer some physicists taste but dare not name, a teaching hidden not in doctrine but in dissonance. That holy discomfort you feel when the world insists on its solidity, but your soul senses it's made of whispers. Even in myth, they tried to warn us. Hermes, the Greek god of boundaries, thresholds, and sudden insight, was not a keeper of temples but a trickster traveler. His wand, the caduceus, was not a weapon of war but a symbol of balanced duality and encrypted gnosis. Wherever roads split he stood, a reminder that the turning point is sacred. And in the Egyptian pantheon there was Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, not a warrior, not a king, a recorder, a keeper of divine language, of geometry and alignment. He etched truth in stone before time bowed to history. Some say the emerald tablets he carried speak in code too perfect for the literal mind. A language not spoken, not written, but felt. The heart knew it long before the lips could forget. And perhaps no myth more boldly dares to teach the spiral truth than the tale of Siddhartha. Not the divine prince of legend painted by golden brushstrokes, but the real raw man who sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not to earn awakening, but to stop running from it. To look the illusion straight in the eyes until it blinked, until it vanished. That was the unwalked road, the road of stillness, of radical presence, of saying, I am not chasing the light, I am the light. Why is that so dangerous? Because you don't need permission for that. No incense, no robes, no translation, just an undefended moment with yourself. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the early Christian texts unearthed at Nag Hammadi, never canonized but never fully silenced, offers this crackling line from Jesus, split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift the stone and you will find me. No ritual, no gatekeepers, just the raw immediacy of divinity humming beneath the mundane. Everywhere, if you have the eyes to see through the illusion. But to see it is to lose the world as you've known it. That's the real cost, not suffering, sacrifice. Not because enlightenment demands pain, but because the illusion resents being seen through. Because the Maya, the great veil, was never passive. It watches, it rearranges, it tightens when tugged. And so we resist, we scroll, we buffer, we explain away the moment our spine quivers at a synchronicity. We call it coincidence, imagination, a glitch in the brain. But what if it's the veil itself glitching? What if déjà vu isn't faulty memory, but soul memory rebooting? A fragment from a former life slipping through, or perhaps not a past life, but a parallel thread. A you that never forgot. What if the beauty you feel by just staring at the sky is not poetic sentiment but a reunion? A silent embrace with something older than memory. The place you knew before birth made you forget. This road you stand before, the unwalked road, it's not new. It's ancient, primordial. Walked by oracles, prophets, mothers, rebels, heretics. It doesn't begin with a map. It begins with a willingness to unknow, to unlearn, to unfold. But that willingness has always been the danger, because if enough remember, the whole system breaks. The old lies can't bear too much light, and so now, beloved soul, it circles back to you. Will you step forward, not toward answers, but toward awareness? Will you risk the unease, the unraveling, the shedding of surety for the chance to see clearly? Can you stand still long enough to feel that holy distortion, the shimmer in the sidewalk, the pulse behind your breath, and say, I see you? Because once you do, nothing can own you again. So I ask you, if the gates are all illusions, what have you been waiting to walk through? And still, they watch from below. There is a paradox resting in plain sight, so potent, so destabilizing, that entire civilizations have built religions to conceal it. The truth is this: the path to divinity is not climbed. It is surrendered to. Now breathe that in, slowly, not climbed, surrendered to. In a world obsessed with striving and ascending, this is heresy. Enlightenment, they told you, is for the saints, the monks, the ones who cut themselves off from the world, who bled out ego in temples and caves. But what if you sitting there in traffic, scrolling through mundanity, aching for something you can't even name? What if you are already the threshold and the key? There has always been a crack in the illusion, faint, silvery, quivering at the edge of perception. The agony of this pathless path is that it is too near, too quiet. You've been taught to look up, look outward, but the door is beneath your very skin, and it flickers. In dream fragments you can't shake, in the ache behind ordinary moments, in the way time slows before a revelation. History has known this, and buried it. The desert fathers of the 3rd century, those radical mystics of the early Christian monastic movement, spoke of hesychia, a silent inner stillness where God speaks not in thunder, but in the echo of one's breath. Abba Moses of Seti once said, "Sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." They had tasted the radiant surrender. But what did history do? It institutionalized their yearning, cataloged it into liturgy, placed it in stained glass instead of sweat and trembling bone. Over time, the silence was replaced by structure. The fire turned into formula, and the living secret vanished beneath doctrine, not forgotten, suppressed. Empire does not fear belief. It fears direct experience. Because once the veil is touched, truly touched, it cannot be untouched. Once the divine is seen without intermediary, all empires of the soul begin to tremble. But the current never stopped flowing. From the Taoist sages wandering the rivers of ancient China to Pseudo-Dionysius in 5th century Byzantium, writing enigmatically of the divine darkness, each hinted at the same shattering simplicity, that to know the infinite you must die before dying. Not in body but identity. Ancient mystery schools from Eleusis to Alexandria encoded this in ritual silence and symbolic death. Their initiates passed through the underworld not as metaphor but as remembrance, tracing the descent of Inanna, the rending of Osiris, the dismembering that preceded the resurrection. Truth was never taught. It was encountered, in the dark, in the still, in the self-stripped bare of story. This isn't about extinction, it's about unveiling, dissolving the mask you forgot was a mask. You do not need more knowledge, you need less noise. You do not need greater effort, you need deeper letting go. Not the letting go of apathy, but the letting go of illusion. There is a whisper inside you, so quiet you mistake it for background hum. But that hum, that's the hymn of your original self, the one who has never been confused, never been divided. The Upanishads carved into India's spiritual memory thousands of years ago thunder with this same simplicity. Tat tvamasi, that thou art. Not you will become, not you must earn, but you already are. The divine is hiding in your own name, waiting to be listened to between breaths. This is what the mystery schools feared you'd realize. This is why Gnostics were burned, why Meister Eckhart was silenced, why indigenous medicine men spoke in metaphor and song. They weren't just silenced. They were erased with precision, not just a flood, a targeted drowning. Because once you see the glitch in the dream, you can't unsee it. And that glitch is this: there is no distance between you and the divine, only disbelief. What we call reality is like a film projected on smoke. Beautiful, convincing, but transient. One breath and it shifts. Can you feel it now, that eerie shimmer in your everyday? The light flickering slightly wrong in the hallway. The clock pausing mid-tick. The warmth in the air when no one is near. The pressure before nothing happens. The stillness after everything does. These are not glitches in reality. They are reality-breaking character. The easiest path to enlightenment has always been the most subversive because it is not earned, it is remembered. Recall this: in Mahayana Buddhism there is the concept of Tathagatagarbha, the womb of the Buddha embedded in all beings. We are not becoming awakened. We are awakening to who we've never ceased to be. You were the secret all along, not a secret to be told, a secret to be lived. But here is the final terror, and the final grace to live this truth truly fully is to vanish. Not to die, to dissolve. The ego cannot hold this light without burning. The roles, the stories, the masks, they fall away in waves. The architect of the illusion begins to collapse and still something remains. And in that empty space where you used to be, a deeper pulse begins. Joy not because of anything, awareness without anchor, radiance without reason. This is what mystics call the pearl of great price. And you, it was always you, were the one it waited for. So now I ask you, not from a place of metaphor, but from the heart of the 1,000-year silence, will you relax your grip on the dream and become the living secret you've always been? Or will you tighten the mask and wait for the world to tell you who you are? Choose, but choose now. The shimmer is widening, and still they watch from below.